The Wiki climate models project a 25% increase in heavy rainfall events, 2 inches or more in 24 hours. But Wisconsin appears to be on the edge of a climate change boundary, with the northern part of the state going through a somewhat different experience than the south. Instead of more precipitation across the board, weather patterns have put the north in a drought cycle roughly every 10 years.
We're seeing deeper and longer droughts in the north. The most recent one was about 2006 to 2013. The lake levels all drop and things change pretty dramatically, and that pattern seems to be intensifying.
Comparing north and south, records from 1950 to 2006 show summertime precipitation decreased by 2 to 4 inches in northern Wisconsin and increased about the same amount in the south. The scientists say that their climate models show a 75% probability that Wisconsin as a whole will have more annual precipitation, mainly during the winter and spring, and more of it will fall as rain instead of snow. In fact, they predict the state's annual average snowfall by the year 2050 will be 14 inches less than it is today. They also insist you can have both a sound economy and a cleaner environment. Milder winters are changing not only the economy, but a way of life in northern Wisconsin. Big tourist draws like snowmobiling, ice fishing, and skiing are shrinking with our warmer winters.
There's just going to be a shorter season for all of those things, and so that means to some extent a way of life is being lost.
Perhaps most notably, the American Birkebeiner, the nation's biggest cross-country ski race in far northern Wisconsin, was canceled in 2017 and 2000 because of a lack of snow. The same problem forced organizers to shorten the race several times in recent years, too. Summer tourism is also being hurt with warmer temperatures that are leaving fewer walleye and trout and taking a toll on what's left.
We found growth rates of fishes that depend on the shallow water declining all around the state.
And tourism is just one Wisconsin industry suffering from the climate change effect. Logging companies are hurt by the wet, soft soil conditions that are in forests during heavy rain years like 2017 and during the warmer winters we've been having. Winter's usually the busy season for loggers because they can run those big machines on the hard, frozen ground without tearing up the forest or getting stuck. Insurance companies have lost a lot of ground to climate change in recent years as bigger storms bring in bigger numbers of customers with bigger damage claims.
The weather volatility is just causing more claims to be submitted in the industry as a whole, anywhere from 10 to 15% more claims on those property homeowners type claims. The more claims that you get, the more it has the potential to impact rate.
In 2013, Madison-based American Family Insurance sent this letter to some of its Madison area customers, notifying them of a significant increase in their premium with the explanation, our climate is changing and that wind and hail claims have exceeded premiums charged in 8 of the past 10 years. Claims have also skyrocketed for flood and crop insurance.
The long-term weather patterns are changing, and we know that they are becoming more extreme when they happen.
And with that in mind, we just need to get to the point where we start building homes and businesses to withstand the forces of nature.
But utilities are also part of the problem. Their burning of fossil fuels to generate our electricity has been and is a big contributor to the greenhouse effect. Renewable energy like wind, sun, and plants is the solution. Now, Wisconsin had been a leader in moving from fossils to renewables. In 2006, the state set a goal of generating 10% of its electricity from renewable energy by the year 2015 and achieved that goal 2 years early. But since then, Wisconsin government leaders have not raised the bar, and the National Conference of State Legislatures shows we now have one of the lowest renewable energy standards in the country.
The Public Service Commission can dictate rules and regulations or nudge power companies along saying, hey, what can we do to have more renewables in the state of Wisconsin, make it economically viable to produce renewables here in the state of Wisconsin or energy period in the state of Wisconsin and create a whole bunch of jobs.
But even with little government support, renewable energy generation in Wisconsin still provides more than twice as many jobs as fossil fuel energy generation. Another irony is that some of the nation's most cutting-edge research into renewable energy is being done here in Wisconsin. But with support from some high-level leaders in government, the so-called climate change deniers have changed the debate from science to politics. And now the scientists admit they need to step up and publicly represent their work.
For something that's so obvious to scientists, the Earth is changing, the climate is warming, these are the changes we see coming. It seems like a no-brainer that we should be working real hard on it.
Jack Sullivan was the director of science programs at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources from 2000 to 2015, and he helped build that unit into one of the leading environmental science teams in the world. Sullivan and his staff set about studying the effects climate change was having in Wisconsin, and along with UW researchers and other experts, collaborated on the 2011 Wisconsin Climate Change Impact Report.
We were one of the states that was running out in front in the country in terms of talking about the impacts of climate in the environment.
So we were doing what we were told, and up until 2010, this was one of the highest priorities of the department, to work on climate change adaptation, figure out how we were going to adjust.
But priorities changed when Republicans won majorities in the state assembly and Senate and the governor's office.
When the new administration came in 2011, we were never told to stop.
That year was John Lyon's 26th year as a DNR fish researcher when Wisconsin's new government leaders started to dismantle the world-renowned science program.
It, along with the communications program, were cut on the order of 30 to 50% in a fell swoop. According to the people who actually proposed these cuts, one of the reasons is that they said we were spending too much time working on climate change. And so I think there's a direct relationship there.
Lyon says lawmakers used job cuts to send their unwritten, unspoken message that they wanted climate change and other controversial research stopped.
We're not stupid. We realize that there are things going on, and certainly the work has scaled back dramatically.
I remember being told that we would no longer refer to it as climate change or global warming when the new administration came in, that we would say it was a changing climate, thereby getting away from the human impacts.
As editor of the DNR subscriber-funded Wisconsin Natural Resources magazine, Natasha Kosalki was instrumental in spreading the news about research, including climate change studies being done at the agency.
Was there ever any explanation as to why you can't say climate change, why you can't say global warming, why we're pulling this story?
No, not really. There was never a dialogue. It was more you're being told, these are the terms we now use.
In his 2017 state budget, Governor Walker proposed eliminating the long-running magazine as a way to save money, even though it's funded by subscribers, not tax dollars. The legislature saved it, but cut it from 6 to 4 issues a year, with editorial control by the DNR communications director, a political appointee.
The DNR was changing.
Ron Seeley covered the agency as a science reporter for the Wisconsin State Journal from 1978 to 2013.
I don't think there's any argument now that the agency did really clamp down on the discussion of climate change and so forth. I did stories that actually confirmed also that they were denying researchers' requests to go to climate change conferences.
The denials included the DNR removing references and information on climate change from its website.
I don't understand that at all. It's information, and that's what we're supposed to provide. This is what taxpayer dollars go for, to provide the best possible information to people to use.
But Seeley points out that even with a DNR in denial, key state agencies are factoring in climate change as they plan to spend your tax dollars.
Which was ironic because at the same time you have engineers in the Department of Transportation now engineering bridges to take into account climate change.
Climate change references and information were also dropped from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission website. One state agency has actually added climate change language, though. The Wisconsin Division of Emergency Management uses the term climate change on its website and includes a statement acknowledging the human impact. Agency spokesperson Lori Getter says they were directed to do that in their new 5-year preparedness plan by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, but that's the exception to what appears to be the rule in Wisconsin.
If you look at the Department of Natural Resources now, climate science and adaptation and climate change is no longer a priority for the agency. It's disheartening, but I guess it's not surprising.
Jack Sullivan's last years at the DNR were spent watching his world-renowned science team broken up. A staff of more than 100 decimated to little more than a dozen. He says climate change alone wasn't the reason, but it was a factor.
It's pretty upsetting to all of us to see.
George Meyer was Wisconsin DNR secretary from 1993 to 2001, and he says the cuts and culture change at the agency have left it a shell of its former self.
I know from talking to some of those people, they were deeply offended by that, and just, you know, they have to do their job. They can't say anything about it, but they've talked to a lot of other people outside.
Hypothetically, we can continue to work on climate change, but we don't have the staff, we don't have the expertise, and there isn't an incentive for it. In fact, there's an incentive not to do it.
In July of 2017, John Lyons retired early from what he describes as his dream job when DNR administrators decided to move him out of the area where he'd worked for the past 32 years. No current DNR scientists we talked with would agree to an interview on this. It's not just the DNR where climate change has affected public discourse in Wisconsin.
Alleged that I had engaged in an act of theft against the citizens of the state of Wisconsin for speaking the words climate change during work hours.
Tia Nelson is the former executive director of the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands, a state agency that manages a trust fund for public schools that includes some public forest land that generates money. The BCPL website included a description of how climate change was threatening the native trees. The daughter of former Wisconsin governor and Earth Day founder Senator Gaylord Nelson says her belief in climate change almost got her fired in 2015 when newly elected treasurer Matt Adamczyk immediately tried but failed to vote her out. In an email, Adamczyk declined our interview request but wrote, quote, "I don't have any control over climate change in my capacity as state treasurer. For this reason, I am not interested in an interview on this topic." The DNR secretary through all of this, Kathy Stepp, also said no to our interview request. Governor Walker and State Senator Tom Tiffany, who initiated much of the science cuts at the DNR, did not respond to our repeated requests for interviews. But that doesn't mean every Republican denies climate change.
When Governor Walker, got rid of the scientists at the DNR, I think that was a mistake, and I think it's something that we'll pay for in the long run.
Former Republican State Senator Dale Schultz says he is frustrated and disappointed that current GOP leaders have broken with the party's past commitment to the environment and conservation that was solidified by Republicans like Abe Lincoln, who created the National Academy of Sciences, Teddy Roosevelt, who inspired the national park system, and former GOP governors Warren Knowles and Tommy Thompson.
It's clear that Wisconsin is pulling back from its heritage of caring about the land and the environment. I think a lot of it has to do with what I regard as sort of a hostile takeover of the Republican Party by members of the old Conservative Party or American Party, the John Birch Society.
Even though polls show most people do agree with the climate change scientists and their findings, those researchers are being put to the test like never before.
Some of these climate models.
But researchers like the UW's Ben Zuckerberg worry the ongoing discussion is distracting the experts and everyone else from taking the urgent action that's needed to slow climate change's rapid pace.
Every day that we get mired down in discussions where we're not talking about proactive measures to do something about climate change, that's just another day lost in terms of sort of what we can do in terms of mitigating that future impact on our societies and on wildlife populations.
Constantly thinking about climate change and being attacked for the science we're doing can take a real emotional toll on us as scientists, and I see that a lot in our community as well.
Dan Vimont is a professor and researcher of climate science at the University of Wisconsin and has been involved in the work since before the term climate change was being used. He says the public's curiosity turned to criticism when the issue turned political.
We get attacked for results that are inconsistent with what somebody would like to see. And those results are based on our understanding, not based on what we want to happen. I mean, as a climate scientist, I would love it if climate change weren't happening.
Along with the future of the planet, scientists are also concerned about the future of their work.
It really has a chilling effect on certain types of research, certain types of results. You know, people risk their jobs sometimes if they say certain things, even though they know these things to be true. And so things get suppressed, even if it's sort of indirectly.
Our climate is changing and the solutions aren't cheap, and they only get more expensive as time goes on.
It's absolutely certain that we have to reduce greenhouse gases. You know, we have to decarbonize energy. We have to decrease our release of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. There is totally no doubt about that, but there are 1,000 pathways to that.
So politics needs to really, they need to figure it out. Because at some point the cost to society will become so large that we'll be spending an exorbitant amount of resources fixing things that we could have done much more efficiently a decade before. And there'll be huge environmental costs, and there'll be social costs to not responding to a changing climate.
And while the experts say it's not too late to take action, it is too late to reverse the damage that's already been done.
If we were to stop today putting all fossil fuel emissions and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, there's a certain time frame or buildup or sort of residence that's already built into the system. So we'd already be feeling those changes for a number of decades into the future before things in the climate started to level off.
The next 20 years will be a fair amount of change, but it's probably the 60 years after that we're going to experience dramatic swings in our climate and changes on the globe that people better be prepared for.
We take for granted today the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. We take for granted the Environmental Protection Agency, which is there to protect every citizen's right for clean air and clean water. None of these things were the law of the land in 1970. And because of the public's response to this call to action, the environmental decade was launched.
Man has the wherewithal and the knowledge to do it, but they have to have the willpower to go out there and get it done.